Hi everyone, welcome to our Cuban night. Next to me is Professor Ossain Raggi, photography teacher at ISA. It's the Academy of Havana. And in the audience is Lynette Sanchez, Cuban artist and alumna from ISA. And ISA is a school where we have a collaboration with since a few years now, but because of Corona, it didn't really get started. Why are these people here? We are very happy that we could invite these both Cuban artists because they are part of a project that we've been doing. It's a collaboration between the Royal Academy of Antwerp and ISA in Havana. We did a 2-year project together with 4 Cuban artists and 4 European artists that are connected to our school. In Cuba, that is Lynette Sanchez and Ossain Raggi, and then Ricardo Elias and Nelson Ramirez de Arellano. On the European side, the photographers are my colleague Charlotte Lybeer, who is here, Ulla Deventer, who just finished a research project at the school, and she's also alumna from our department. Then Simon Roberts from the UK, he just finished, or he will start a 2-year research project if Brexit allows him, but let's not think about that. And then myself. Where Are You From is an exhibition that opened last Thursday, and I'm very happy that we could invite 2 of the Cuban artists. The exhibition runs in a cultural center in Mechelen, beautiful museum. We also made a nice book, so I warmly recommend you to visit the show. Tonight, Ossain will give a talk on the history of Cuban photography, followed by a screening of video work by Lynette Sanchez, and maybe we will have a drink, I'm not sure. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the talk, and I give the floor now to Ossain.
Hi people, it's nice to be here, and I had to ask for your I feel sorry because my English is a little broken. It's not my native language, and I have this strong Latino accent, but I am Latin, you know, and very proud of it. And this is a comprehensive history of photography in Cuba, and of course there is a lot of people who will not show on this presentation because it's impossible to get all the important Cuban photographers in a single slide presentation. And this, the Spanish text says, photography, Cuban photography, a history on images. And this history on images start without images. Why? The first guy who took photos in Cuba was a person named Pedro Telles de Girón, Don Pedro Telles de Girón. He was the son of the Captain General. And who was the Captain General? The Captain General was the colonial governor of Cuba. And his son, Pedro Telles, was a young guy, very interested in all the advances of technology. And he imported a daguerreotype camera as early as April 1840. Do you know, daguerreotype was presented at 1839, and in April he imported this daguerreotype camera, and we Cubans get it right from the beginning. In a newspaper in May, this newspaper was reporting what already happened in April. The name of the newspaper was El Lucero y Noticioso de La Habana, what in English means the bright star and the news of Havana. And of course, this newspaper had different sections: sports, politics, entertainment, and properly placed in the arts section. There is a news about the experiment will take place the last week of April, on which Pedro Telles de Girón successfully managed to produce an image of the Plaza de Armas, which is then the center of Havana City. We don't have that image. It disappeared at the moment of the retire of the Spanish troops from Cuba at the end of the 19th century. It was on display on the the huge salon on the Capitan General's Palace by many years until the Spaniards retreat from Cuba, and then this image disappeared. Of course, after the experiments of Pedro Telles de Girón took a couple of pictures, and if he take any other images, we don't know. But after him, there is a lot of Americans, Italians, French, and eventually Cubans taking pictures. We had some pictures from that age, but it's difficult to assess who make it. And as many are portraits, we are not pretty sure that those portraits were taken in Cuba. They can be bring it from US, from everywhere, from Spain. And it's difficult to say this picture was taken in Cuba and this is one of the first Cuban pictures. What happened after that? Well, happened that we have, and we still have, an important tobacco industry. And this tobacco industry produce a lot of imaginary, and they need photography as a pattern for the lithography. And they produce a lot of those photographies depicting different aspects of the tobacco industry. This is one of the many you can find. It's an anonymous image of a tobacco factory. It says tobacco warehouses and the name of the guy in charge. But what starts being interesting is that at 1868, Cuba starts an independence war. This first war lasted by 10 years. There is not so much photography about this process because photography was not readily available. The processes are pretty slow. But then, at the end of this 10-year process, both sides were basically exhausted. And there is a second war, which also have few or no photography. And there is a third war, which lasted by only 3 years. But this war was quite interesting because, for photography's sake, because we had the character José Gómez de la Carrera. He was the first war reporter in Cuba. He had 2 passports, a Spanish passport and an American passport, US passport. And he used the Spanish passport among the Spanish troops, but he used the US passport among the Cubans belligerents. And he managed to give a glimpse of what was happening on that terrible moment of Cuban history. Why I call it a terrible moment? Because basically half of the Cuban population perished on those 3 years. The last Spanish census said that Cuba had 6 million inhabitants. The first census of the Republic said Cuba had almost 3 million inhabitants. And all these casualties happened in 3 years. Under the orders of a character, those are independentist Cubans, at the end of the war. And this is not a photo taken from the concentration camps of the Second World War. It's a photo taken from the reconcentration camps implemented by the Spaniards in Cuba on these 3 years under the orders of a gentleman named Valeriano Weyler y Nicolau, with some nobility position in Spain. And basically, he managed to kill half of the Cuban population in a matter of 3 years. But this genocide has been forgotten. And after this terrible process, then there is a so-called republic. Why so-called republic? Because at the beginning of the republic, the founding fathers of the Cuban Republic had to accept a law which was passed by an American senator named Platt. He was also known as the Boss Platt. He was a Democrat senator by the state of New York. And this amendment of the Cuban Constitution basically says that the U.S. had to approve every foreign trade of Cuba, every foreign relation, and they can send troops to Cuba, whatever they want. Well, it was a republic. And basically, if we do not accept that, we will have no republic. That's something what marks the first 50 years of the Cuban Republic. But also, there is a rich society, and there is photographers portraying this rich society, like the Valle Rico, which, as you know, you can find this kind of photography everywhere in Latin America, in Europe. It can be taken here. But there is also more adventurous people, like Joaquin Bles. Joaquin Bles started dabbling with nudes and experimental photography, and he had this production which is more classical, but he also produced more avant-garde photography. This is for what Joaquin Bles is better known. Take a look on this image. You will find it later on Cuban history of photography. It caused a sort of impact. This is Joaquin Bles' work. This is also Joaquin Bles' work, which is more in a more contemporary documentary style. We had also Manuel Martinez Illa, who get interested in sports and sportsmen. And we also have, at this moment, a lot of anonymous photography. I always show this because this is a typology, which is quite common even today. The Cuban beside the car. Look, what a wonderful car I have. And you will find this even today. And a lot of anonymous photography, because you see, these are evidently the authorities of some village in Cuba. And at that moment appears the newspaper guys, the guys who are gonna show what is happening, really happening in Cuba. And they were pretty brave, producing a corpus of images which was pretty aware of what was happening at that moment in Cuba. This is the work of Moises Fernandez, and this is a public school in Cuban countryside. This is a criminal beaten by the police. And of course, we had the work of Constantino Arias with this photo. This guy was a senator of the Republic. This photo was named VAT 69. And Constantino had this harsh view to the upper classes, but at the same time had this quite sweet and sour view for the poor guys who are trying to make a living, like the Crooked A. That's the name. Everybody knows this image, and it's a musician. And this is another anonymous image. The only what we know about this image is written in pencil on the reverse. And it said he was condemned to death, and his last wish was to smoke a cigar. He was condemned to death by murder. And we don't know who is and who take the photo. This is from the archive of Diario de Cuba, an important Santiago de Cuba newspaper. Santiago de Cuba is the second important city in Cuba. And they had this beautiful image archive. But they seldom put any info on the photos. This is the work of Ernesto Fernandez, which luckily is still alive, and it marks a particular moment. This image was taken at the moment that they are building the Civic Square, what is now known as Revolution Square. And it marks a particular moment. This is an image of Jose Marti, which is called the Apostle of the Cubans. And that particular moment, this image shows what most people in Cuba believes what's happening. And evidently, a group of persons had to react because the situation are becoming very, very bad at that moment. But at the same time, there is the photo clubs. There is things getting worse and worse in Cuba, and there is the photo clubs. The photo clubs are not interested in things going worse, are interested in boats and pigeons and Pennsylvania Station in the US. They are great technicals. They had they teach photography to many people. They bring the technique and they make incredible expositions. They bring important exposition from Cartier-Bresson, Robert Capa, and they bring all these expositions to Cuba. But at the same time, they were more or less myopic about what is happening in Cuba at that moment. And that was their glory and their sin. Tito Alvarez, who will become a very important photographer years later, you will keep seeing his work. And you know what happened? In the meantime, there is a war in Cuba, and Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, Camilo Cienfuegos get to Havana. And then start what is better known about Cuban photography, the epic of the Cuban Revolution. And for sure you know that image has been reproduced a lot on t-shirts and all kind of. This is the whole photogram. I had the chance to talk with Alberto Corda. And it's very funny because Alberto Corda makes a different history for everyone. I will tell you what he told me once. And he told me that he was taking pictures at this particular moment for a fashion show, for a fashion magazine. His wife, she was a very well-known fashion model, Norca, was appointed to parade with other militia women, civil militia, and they all prepared their uniforms for the occasion because Corda, Norca's husband, is going to take photos, and he comes to this parade and take the photos, which were intended for to be published in a fashion magazine. And at the end, he kept going, and suddenly another Cuban important photographers were near the tribune where is going to be given the speeches, and Corrales, another important Cuban photographer, called him Alberto. Corda was his name of artist. His name was Alberto Diaz. And Corrales called him, Alberto, come here. And he joined the rest of the photographers because they are supposed to go later to have a few drinks. And he was there with his Leica M2 camera, and his 90 millimeters lens. And he's, as a reflex, he was a photographer, he was in a place where the people are gonna speak, and he started panning, and suddenly he noticed Che Guevara, and he told me, I see him, I shot, then I tried to make a vertical shot, but he noticed that I was pointing at him and get back. That day, he told me that day, Che looks as he had asthma or something. He looks feeling bad. That's probably why he comes closer to the front of the tribune. And that's the history of this particular photo. Eventually, it becomes quite famous when an Italian guy buy a copy and make it popular in the wall. Alberto Diaz never get a dime for that photo. But it is, for many people, one of the better known photos in history. And it's not the only photo of that period, of the epic of the Cuban Revolution. There is a lot, many. Some by Corda, some by Raúl Corrales, like this beautiful one named The Dream, or this other, which is named The Nightmare. And it's very funny because Raúl Corrales always insisted that they are not a couple, but then Raúl Corrales' granddaughter bedroom, they are like a couple, hanging there by her grandfather. This is some other images by Raúl Corrales, one of the other very important photographers of the time. This is in the back of the Cuban pesos. Is Fidel talking to a crowd, more than 1 million people there. One of these very, very long speeches. Leovigildo González. We have the beautiful work of Mario Diaz. Enrique de la Hoz, who died recently. And do you remember Tito? The guy in the 50s? Well, he's back in the 80s. And he bring all this technique from the photo clubs to the new guys who start changing Cuban photography in the 80s. In the 80s, all this epic has faded a little. Everything was a little tired of this grandeur, but the little guy, the everyday Cuban, start getting interesting for photographers again, and we have Tito, and not just the little guy, but the little dog too, and Maria. Sorry, mistake. I wrote Maria Elena as Maria Eugenia Aya. Marucha, she was the first director of the Phototech. The interesting and seminal work of Alfredo Sarabia. This is also Alfredo Sarabia's. Weird. He had this chance to get this moment on which reality becomes a little weird. And, well, weird is. He was an incredible technician, and a lot of the Cuban photographers for that period learned how to print and how to present their work with Alfredo Sarabia. Rolando Puyol, Jorge Viera, Humberto Mayol, That's the 90s. And we are getting close to a special period in Cuban history, which is known as the special period. Until the 80s, things fared more or less well with Cuban economy. But at the 90s, everything started collapsing. Cuba have most of its external exchange with the former East Bloc, and basically all those countries disappeared, and suddenly we had less than the 18% of our former foreign trade, and nobody wants our sugar, and we can buy food and goods, and as external economics of Cuba collapsed, internal economics also collapsed. At that moment, we have back the image of the poor kids on the street, on the work of Ossain Gonzáles. This is the Cuban artist. The Cuban artist, it's a surname for those people who try to win, try to get a living on performing in the street, and this gets back on the 90s. We had the wonderful work of Raúl Cañivano, who was a gelder who get a camera, and he traveled to his family countryside farm, because in Havana you can live, you can make a living, and we were lucky. He started taking photos. And that's what he brings back. Sorry for the quality of some of the copies, but I asked my friends to send me photos, and sometimes they send me this. This is a series from Raúl Cañivano named Tierra Guajira. Lázaro Miranda, another photographer from the same period. Nadal Antelmo, Nadalito. Cristóbal Herrera. We have the work of photo-based artists like José Manuel Force in a more conceptual direction. The work of Cirenaica Moreira. And do you remember the photo in the beginning? Yes, it keeps repeating in Cuban history. She produced this corpus of work addressing some of the feminine concerns. Most are self-portraits. Abigail González. Julio Bello Aguabella, who is an incredible technician. And the wonderful work of Juan Carlos Salón. This is one of his early photographies, but he kept working till today, and his work never stopped amazing me. On this gallery of personal, of Cuban characters, this is Juan Carlos Salón too. He spent some of his time in New York, and he also have a very interesting view of his life as New Yorker. This is a series named Born to be Free, about this. All guys in Cuba, they go every day to the beach, and he documents all those guys. We have the work of René Peña, Pupi, and Pupi is one of the better known Cuban photographers with this interesting work, mostly studio photography. With a tinge homoerotic. Ismael Rodriguez, Manuel Piña, some of his early work. He moved to Canada, to Vancouver, and becomes a student with a Canadian photographer, Jeff Waltz. And now his work is quite different to this. And the very important character, Marta Maria. I am sorry for the quality of the reproductions, but Marta Maria was maybe one of the most influential Cuban photographers. We also had the work of young Cuban photographers like Tatiana Mesa with this series named The Ideal. Rigoberto Kendo, Chacho, which portraits the life of some of the more marginal people, among them his family. This is a series named Home Club. We also have characters like Felco Carderin Pardillo. He spent some of his life here in Belgium and had this amazing, amazing work, which goes from studio photography to an incredible documentary photography about Cuban travestites and the world of these performers, erotic, the Cuban countryside, see in a very, very creative way. But his work had this timeless feeling because he goes to these places on which time apparently do not pass. This photo can be taken in the 50s, but it was taken in this century. Those are people in the eastern side of Cuba now. I found always this timeless feeling on Felco's work. These are incredible places. Some of these persons come from a very, very far away place in Cuba, where most of the landowners are women. But the men are basically migrant workers. They come and they go, and when they come to the farm, they become the father figure of the many childs of the family. Some of the childs are their sons, some others are not, but he's the father figure for everybody else, for everybody, doesn't matter. And 3 months later, the guy goes to another farm, and another guy comes, and they are rotated by these farms, usually owned by the ladies. This is the guys, and this is the ladies. And there is people living in Cuba as when Christopher Columbus arrived. This is the work of Glenda Salazar. She works with different intervention projects. This is one of her recent work on which she left messages on these fruits who are intended to go to the market. They are positive messages for the people to found when they go to pick the fruit. And she documents all this process. And do you remember Alfredo Saravia? Well, this is the son, Alfredo Saravia hijo. Alfredo Saravia's father, he died very, very young. His work was quite important for most photographers of my generation. And I had the chance to renew the friendship of the father with the son, because as usually say that the talent jumps a generation. Not this time. Not this time. And that's the work of Alfredo Saravia, the son. Alfredo Saravia Fajardo. He had this essay about the presence of Jose Marti on Cuban reality. He traveled through the whole island, documenting all the monuments which are everywhere in Cuba. Jose Marti is quite transcendental for Cuban, to be a Cuban. You need to know, Cubans for every tendency, they inspire on Jose Marti. And it's quite transcendental for Cubans. And he documented this, the presence. And it's very funny because this is an unretouched photo. More from... What? Jose Marti was the only guy who managed to make all the Cubans agree on something. He was considered the apostle of the Cuban independence. He organized the final war from the independence. And he was also an amazing poet, a precursor of modernism, which is the first contemporary movement on Spanish language of poetry. And Rubén Darío, maybe the most important of the modernists, he always said that his teacher was Jose Marti. He is important not just for Cubans, he is important for most Spanish-speaking people. Even if he created a war against Spain, he had monuments in Spain. He was quite an amazing guy. And you can see it's everywhere in Cuba. Sometimes it will be more in spirit than in stone, but in stone it's everywhere. And Alfredo Saravia made this amazing document on different places, and sometimes this is a small figurine in the background of many things. Sometimes it's a close-up like here, but this is part of the same essay about the presence of Marti everywhere. And this is a photo he created with the photo of his father's photo. This is the guy in the corner. This is Alfredo Saravia's work too. We also had the work of young photo-based artists like Glaube Ballestero. On this area, named for when you were here, when you weren't here. And there is an element on the Havana cityscape which is missing. Of course, if you are Cuban, you will discover it pretty fast. But it's not evident. Many people look at this, okay. It's okay, it's a city, Havana cityscape, where the Revolution Square Tower is missing. It's like having Paris without the Eiffel Tower, something like that. We have the work of Adrian Fernandez, Milanese. And Adrian started documenting This is his early work in black and white. But then he started documenting the life of the new Cuban upper classes, the lifestyle of these new riches, and he make it in this quite appealing way. We had Alejandro Calzada. Alejandro Calzada is from a particular place in Cuba named Remedios. Remedios is the most shabby town you can imagine, a dusty town which had absolutely, well, there is a church from the 17th century there, but there's basically nothing happening in Remedio 364 days on the year. But then there is La Parrandas, and suddenly all happens in Remedios. The craziest carnival you can imagine. They prepare and produce this crazy, crazy, crazy carnival on which all the characters in Remedio become something else. Suddenly the town's travesty becomes the blue boy, and the guys of the town becomes the matadores, or the town doctor becomes the Empress of China. And Alejandro Calzada documented all this transformation process in an amazing series. We also had the work of Nelson Jalil. He works with all kinds of imaginary, sometimes taken from magazines or from this TV program which he created to photograph. The work of Jorge Otero, and we are getting a little out of photography right now because this is not photography. It was created. He created these characters. He's very good making 3D, and he created these almost realistic figurines. Handel Lara with these small landscapes. With these phrases. Yuri Obregón Batard with these harsh comments about Cuban reality. Michael Dominguez Buster. In Cuba, Red Chronic is banned from the news, and he basically take the pictures of the Red Chronic and reproduce it using clay, and then rephotograph these images, which are exact reproductions of police photos. But this is not Red Chronic, this is something else. Susana Delante, she does something similar, and this reproduction of crime scenes usually refer to in-house violence. We also had the work of Leandro Feal Bonachea. He is very interested in the life of the young guys and their relation with the environment and with the politics. And he documents all these youngsters on their parties, their meetings, their everyday life. Lisandra Isabel Garcia, Vanessa Fernandez Guarch. She places these hidden cameras, like the ones used to catch fauna, on places where the Cubans get, and these cameras catch small glimpses of reality with small audio clips, and that's what she presents as we were fauna. In some way, we are. Claudia Corrales. Yeah, the surfer. And we had the work of Ludmila y Nelson, which are the single work of two different artists, or an artist which is two-person. And that's all, folks. Yes, I am more than glad to present you with my former student and now my colleague, Lynette Sanchez. She never stopped amazing me. Her work had this sense of, it's like a secret inside a riddle, and have this elegance, beauty, and mystery at the same time that I want you to share with me. Lynette, she is very, very shy.